Well, what's a trim tab? When you think about a giant ocean liner, how does a captain turn an ocean liner? You do it by, you think he turns the wheel and the wheel turns the rudder, right? But that's not how it happens because there's so much water pressure on the rudder. There's a little mini rudder on the rudder. So when the captain turns the wheel turns the mini rudder, which is a trim tab. That creates some pressure on the big rudder, then the big rudder moves, and then the whole ship moves. So with your business, and I mentioned tipping point, what's your trim tab? What is my trim tab? What's that little thing you can do at that fulcrum thing better to make your business better? It doesn't have to be a giant thing to do to change your business. You can just do a little trim tab change and maybe get giant results. So that's the same idea with the tipping point.
Everyone has a sock drawer where we hide the stuff we don't want to face. Today, we're opening yours. I'm Lisa Begley, and this is the Sock Drawer Podcast. If your life feels messy, stuck, or outgrown, good. That's where we begin. Hey everyone, welcome to the Sock Drawer Podcast family. Today, I want to ask you a question. Entrepreneurship is often portrayed as a straight path forward to success, but anybody who's actually built a business knows the truth is very different. And today's guest has spent decades studying what makes entrepreneurs succeed, fail, adapt, and grow. Steve Strauss is one of the most recognized voices in small business in America. He has written 18 books, including the Small Business Bible, served more than 20 years as the senior small business columnist for USA Today, and has advised entrepreneurs around the world. But behind the strategy and the success stories are the real moments that shape a career. And today we're talking about those moments and the current messy middle that he finds himself in. Welcome to the Sock Drawer Podcast. Listen, Steve Strauss, entrepreneur, author, speaker, and one of the most respected advocates for small business owners in the United States. I wish I would have met you before I started my business.
Oh, that's very sweet. Lisa, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Love to be here. Love your show. So this is great.
Oh my gosh. Well, I am honored to have you. Now you've written, for USA Today, right?
I write my column for Inc. these days. Yep. That's for sure true.
So your latest book, Small Business Boom, I love it. I want to hear more about it and explores how people can build successful businesses in an unpredictable world, which, gosh, that's
right. That's where we are for sure. Yeah. And you know what? So I wrote my book, my best-selling book, The Small Business Bible, over 20 years ago, and it went through 3 editions and, which is fun and exciting and great. Yeah. And then around the time of COVID, everything had changed a lot. That book, The Small Business Bible, it was a couple, 5, 6, 7 years old. I mean, the advice in there was, Groupon at one point. So, okay, maybe it needs to be updated. So I was like, let's do a book for today. And so that's what your Small Business Boom is about. It's, your digital marketing. But what's interesting is, there's a bunch of new tricks, but in the end, it's about authenticity, getting your name out there, sharing your passion, what your gift is with your customers and, making an impression that way.
Yes, I do. I am so aligned with you on that. It just feels like it's definitely evolved and changed. And there's so much centered around authenticity and all of that these days. And a lot of social media. I had someone tell me recently, and then I want to start with your origin story because, I like to go back to the beginning. But I had someone say, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this. I had someone say to me a while back, it's almost not that it's obsolete, but email, websites, things like that. They're fine, but really social media is where you build. Is this true? Do you find this to be accurate, or can there still be benefits in all?
I think there's benefits in all because people take their information in different ways. Like I personally, I'm a reader. That's how I like to get my information. So I like newsletters. I write a newsletter. I like getting newsletters. I like reading websites. Right? But some people are visual, right? Or they like to listen, right? So a podcast like your show, right? Or TikToks are what work. So so in your business, you can do what you're great at, but you also need to think about your customer and how they gather their information. And you want to put your business and yourself in front of them where they are. So in many cases it's social media, but in many cases It's not. I still think it's true.
I agree. So I love that because I was kind of like that sort of slapped me like a like a brick in the face, and I was like, really? Is that being obsolete now? Are we losing that? So I'm glad to hear you say that. Now listen, tell me about this. So when you were younger,
Hmm.
did you always imagine yourself working with entrepreneurs and small business owners? Like, how did that evolve for you?
It's actually a really relevant story. So, and I love to tell this story because the best entrepreneur I ever knew was my sweet dad. And my dad took one carpet store. Him and his partner turned it into like the biggest chain of carpet stores in California back in the day.
No kidding.
And then, like it was like 25 stores, a very big, successful business. And it got so big that my dad didn't enjoy it anymore because he wasn't really an entrepreneur anymore. And in the end, he sold out his share to his partner and had one giant carpet warehouse because he really liked being an entrepreneur. And I remember when I was about 8 years old or so, I had to write a story about what my dad did for a living.
Oh,
And I didn't know what to say. I wasn't like doctor or lawyer, like retail carpet store owner doesn't flow off the 8-year-old tongue very well, right? So I asked him, like, okay, well, Dad, what do you do? What should I say you do? And this is like, the 70s. And he's like, well, Stevie, I'm an entrepreneur. Now that word was not in vogue then as it is now.
no.
All right. I'm like,
Yeah.
an entrepreneur, what? And he said, well, that's a person who's willing to take a risk with money to make money. And look at all these years later, I still remember that definition. And I've always been intrigued by and loved entrepreneurs ever since. So I grew up in a family where we talked about small business around the dinner table and around my dad's business. So eventually, I found my path, which was I went to law school.
Right. Yeah.
I wanted to be a writer,
Tell me
actually.
more.
In my early 20s, I wanted to be a writer, but it was pre-internet, to date myself a little bit. And, there was gatekeepers. You had to find an editor or the editor's assistant who would say yes. And, I couldn't get published. Nobody cared what Steve Strauss had to say, and so I tried magazine articles. I, wrote some book proposals out, nothing happened. So finally I met the woman who's going to be my wife, and I'm like, oh, I got to be a grown-up now. So I went off to law school, and it turned out I liked it. It was interesting, and I was good at it.
Yeah.
And so I started out. I got a big job in the big city, the big bucks, and I was big time unhappy. It was very difficult. And like many small business people, like many entrepreneurs, how did I get started? I got fired. I was a crappy employee, Lisa.
Yeah.
Oh
man.
Does that,
I can resonate. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went and started my own law practice. This is how I started as an entrepreneur. So I went and started my own law practice, and it was, I made a profit my first month, and I thought I was some kind of business genius, which I clearly was not, which I later learned.
Yeah.
But what I found was I liked the business part of my business of being a lawyer more than I liked the legal part. Like the suing people stuff isn't very fun, but finding customers and growing my business and all those things, I really enjoyed that. And once I became a lawyer, I was able to become published. I got a publisher in New York who liked what I had to say, and I got a book deal, and so that's how I started. And then USA Today found me because I had written these books, and they were creating usatoday.com. They needed a lawyer who could write about business, small business specifically, and a friend of mine said, oh, you need to meet my friend Steve. And that was a very, very fortuitous, long-winded story of how I got started where I ended up going.
No, not at all. I love the stories. That's what we're about here, and all the pivots, right?
Yeah.
From a lawyer to a writer to an entrepreneur and now a columnist. How did you combine all that? Like how, obviously they needed a lawyer, columnist.
Right.
How did you blend that?
You know what? It was all very organic. Like I just, you're always told follow your passion. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think there's a lot of not truth in that because, if your passion is, 15th century Flemish architecture, you can follow your passion all you want. You're not going to make a great living at it, probably, So I was fortunate that I really turned out I'm a good writer, right? I'm a much better writer than I ever was a lawyer, which is another reason I ended up, leaving the law and going into writing. And so after I got, so getting that first book was the hardest part. I was almost I was in my mid-30s before I ever got published, almost 40, really. And I had been trying for many years to get published, right? And as I said, originally nobody cared what Steve Strauss had to say. Once I got a little bit of a platform, once I was a lawyer, and then once USA Today hired me and these things, I got published. And I have my second father, my sweet dad, who taught me about entrepreneurship, passed away too young. But I've had his best friend, be my mentor and second dad my whole life. And he's always said to me, business and life is, with all due deference to Mrs. Gump, Forrest Gump's mom, it's like a jar of pickles. I'm like, a jar of pickles. He said, well, think about a jar of pickles. You open the jar and they're all jammed in there, right? Right. And getting that first pickle out of the jar is hard. But once you get the first pickle out, all the other pickles come out really, really easily. So the trick is to get the first pickle out of the jar. Okay. And that's a metaphor I have used many, many times. Okay. And so for me, like getting that first writing pickle out of the jar was really, really hard. But then I've been able to write 18 books since then. They came out much, it was much, much easier. Have you found that to be kind of true? What do you think of that?
Well, I've only written one book.
Yeah, well, good for you, though. That's no little thing.
I'm listening to you. If I had to go do the process that you did, it would be different. I don't know that I would have a book. And I love to write. For me, I don't know if you find this, Steve, but I need to surround myself with peace and quiet and no distractions for me to actually write. And this was, simple stories and just talking about letting go and being able to move on. I would like to get a little bit more personal in my next book, but publishing books have come to a point of being simpler these days. Not that it's simple. I don't want to minimize it at all, but for anybody else, but it isn't it was a lot tougher back then.
Yeah, oh, for sure. But even in your career, you do a lot of different things, right? Yeah. And you're podcasting and getting that, whoever's listening, whatever that thing you want to do, getting that first thing done is just monumental, really.
Yeah. Yes. And I'm a consummate learner. So thankfully I love to learn. So I'm never afraid to jump in and go, well, first of all, I always say this. If you'd have told me 2 years ago I'd be podcasting, I would have poo-pooed you right out of the room. I would have been like, no, I'm not doing that. That's not a thing on my radar. But like to your point, it just evolved. Like it just kind of like fell into that. And so here I am, it's sort of, you could call me retired, I guess, because I'm not answering to anybody else, closed anyway.
Yeah.
It's just been, I love to pivot and I love to try new things and I love to learn. So that has been I think that has been the catalyst for why I've been able to continue, just doing all these different things. And I'm so grateful.
Good for you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. So tell me a little bit early on, were there and I'm sure there are, because failure is how we grow, so mistakes and things, that kind of enabled you to pivot and have to, try something else.
Yeah, there's two in particular. One was best. I ran my law practice for a decade. It wasn't like I didn't do it. And at one point it had grown really successful, and I thought, well, I'm going to open up a second office. Okay. Boy, I didn't know. I lived in California back then. I was in Sacramento, and I wanted to open an office in a bigger city in San Francisco, and that's about an hour and a half away. Okay, so but I did it. I took a lot of money. Opened up the second office, and I just didn't have the skills at that point, and technology wasn't where it is today, where it's easier to be remote and do things like that. So running an office in two different cities that are not that close to each other, trying to hire people in another city, it was way more expensive to open up shop in the second city. It lasted about 9 months before I realized, this was a mistake, So I just bit off more than I can chew, which has been a valuable lesson. The second time I've had to really pivot back in the early days, and I've pivoted. There's no secret I'm on your show. I've pivoted many times. I'm in the middle of a pivot right now, actually. But the second one was it was the .com boom era. Okay, and I was in this fortuitous spot where I had been early into the .com world. Like everyone creates content now, but there was a time where I was one of the few people online creating real, valuable, good content. And I ended up getting more clients than I knew what to do with, because all these big .coms were coming online. They didn't have content. They needed content. Often their customers were small business people or entrepreneurs. That's who they were trying to attract. So me being the small business columnist for USA Today back then, I was online. I was creating content. So it was amazing. And I rode this wave, and I closed my law practice. I said to my wife, I'm starting a content company. And it started out great. It was great until the .com crash. Yeah. And, I lost maybe 80% of my clients. So very, very difficult. It was really, unexpected, because it happened very fast. Yeah. It was not a pleasant experience to go through. But you know what? It is the nature of entrepreneurship that, is it fun and exciting and challenging and interesting and it's all those things. And it's also hard and scary and challenging and, those things too. And at that moment, boy, that's when I realized, all my Pollyanna-ish, aren't you lucky to be your own boss kind of stuff was like, well, yeah and no, So, yeah, I've had a couple pivots along the way.
Yeah, which, gosh, I mean, so when you look back at that experience, where did you end up after that? Like, where did it lead you to go?
Actually, what happened was, I became, now we're called influencers. But at that time, it wasn't a thing, okay? And it wasn't that term. Mostly it was called spokespeople. I got a email from someone who said, hey, we're doing I represent an electric company who does backup generators, and we want to do a remote show and bring you in, and we're going to show why every business needs a backup generator. And so I went, and it was lucrative, and it was fun, and it was interesting. And I'm like, I like this. This is interesting. And so I was their spokesperson for Emerson Electric, of all things, for several years. And that led to me becoming a spokesperson, i.e. influencer, for Bank of America for about a dozen years, which was really beautiful. I did it with Microsoft for many years. I did it for PayPal. So I went from creating kind of white label content for websites that ended up going out of business to becoming more of a face and a well-known entity.
So can you give me can you paint a picture for me and the listeners of what that meant back then to be a spokesperson for someone?
Yeah, right. So Bank of America came to me, okay, and they wanted to start promoting their small business services. They wanted a friendly, respected, smart face to go out there and talk to small businesses on their behalf. So that's what I started doing. They put me on. They create a bunch of events where I would go do live events in different cities. We did a video series very early on when people weren't doing video very much, where I would talk to these great small business customers of the bank. I created weekly content. They put out something called the Small Business Owner Report twice a year, and they needed publicity for that. So they would do what's called a satellite media tour, or SMT. So an SMT is where I would go to New York and I would sit in the studio, and they had lined up 25 interviews for me back to back across the country, starting on the East Coast, going to the West Coast over the course of a day. So at 6 a.m. East Coast time, I would talk to a local station in Philadelphia, radio or TV station. And then we would move on to a station in Boston. And then we move on to a station in Chicago. And then we move west as the day went on, and I would do pretty much the same interview again and again and again. And I would talk about small business, and then I would weave in this Bank of America Small Business Owner Report. It was a skill I learned, and they used to do a lot of these kind of satellite media tours. And it was really fun, and I got to do a lot of those. So it was really, to answer your question, it was really varied. I got to do a lot of different things that gave me new skills, things I had not done before that I had to learn how to do and trust that I could do it. And mostly I was able to do it.
I love that. And so, see, this is the beauty of pivots. I know they're hard in the moment, but they usually bring you somewhere that you never thought you'd be. So I love that. Well, listen, so, okay.
Can I add one more thing to that?
Yeah, could you?
Okay. So these days I have a newsletter. Okay. And I'm not here to promote my newsletter, but it's relevant to our conversation, and it's called Notes to an Entrepreneur, because I love entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And what I've learned is, apropos what you were just saying, every great entrepreneur, before they became a great entrepreneur, had some big pivot moment. And I find those pivot moments to be actually the most interesting thing. Like they went from not being famous to being famous. And why? Because they figured some little secret out, or they took some big risk, right? I tell the story in my newsletter of Tommy Hilfiger, okay, the designer. Yeah. Well, when he started out, he wasn't Tommy Hilfiger. He was just another designer at another shop, you know, in his mid-30s with his career going nowhere. And he's like, what am I going to do? If I just stay where I am, no one's going to ever hear from me. I'm never going to design my own clothes. And he got some investors who believed in him, and he went and found himself a publicist. And he said to the publicist this very same thing. He goes, what do? I want to get my name out there. I want to become my own designer, right? You want to become an entrepreneur. Yeah. The publicist came up with a audacious plan. He said, well, how about we buy a billboard in Times Square, and we will compare you to all the great designers of the day, to Ralph Lauren and Perry Ellis and Calvin Klein. And that's what he did. He got hundreds of thousands of dollars together from investors, took the biggest risk someone could take, bought a audacious billboard right across from the Polo store in Times Square, and it compared Tommy Hilfiger to these great designers. And shook up the world. The next week he was on the Tonight Show, and he became Tommy Hilfiger
in a week.
Isn't that amazing? Okay, but the cojones to do that, right? That's a big deal.
Yeah.
So I love those pivot moments for entrepreneurs, because they are like you, they are like me, and they did something different, they did something better, they found a little niche that really worked, and finding out that if they did it, maybe I can do it too. That's the stories I love to tell.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great story. I had no idea. But here, can I just bring this into now? And I have a question for you, because I'm sure there was some investment involved, and
of course
a little bit more, of course, right? And I think it's so hard now, because that is such a big business, I'll say, that people are trying to help people. We can get you this, we can get you that. For the folks who want that Tommy Hilfiger story, who want to become a brand setter.
Okay.
What do you recommend? And for a way to be careful that you're not getting, wrapped up with the wrong, how do you separate? How do you decide what's the right place, the right direction to go in? Because that's
so. It's not just about money. Like the stories I like to share that I find, yes, of course, sometimes it's about money, but it's not always about money. Like Martha Stewart. Before Martha Stewart became Martha Stewart, she was just a caterer in Connecticut, and she had one book out, and no one had ever heard of her. Her magic came when she found the right partner. It wasn't getting the right big deal or a big amount of money or a big risk. She found somebody who could do the operations. And this is true for so many entrepreneurs. Like you have your skill set, right? I got my skill set. The secret is to find somebody who, it's almost like a marriage. Like who is it who fills our, in the movie Rocky, there's a moment where Paulie says to Rocky, why are you with my sister Adrian? I don't get it. And Rocky said, well, we fill gaps. And you fill gaps? What do you mean? He goes, well, I got gaps. And I'm not going to even do my Rocky imitation. I'm going to save you from that. I got gaps. And, Adrian's got gaps. And together we fill gaps.
Yeah.
And so I think for many entrepreneurs, the real secret is to find the person or find the people or find the team who can fill your gaps, right? So that you're able to concentrate on what you do best. Like what I do best is I like to speak, I like to write, I like to create content. I'm not very good at the budgeting and the other stuff of my business. Some of that back, and I got people who can help me with that so that I don't have to spend my time doing that. And I can spend my time doing what, some people call in your genius zone, So to the extent you can be in your genius zone, and get people to fill your gaps in the other places, I think that's what really makes a big difference.
Love that. That is so true. And now you've been studying entrepreneurs for decades.
Yeah.
From your perspective, Steve, what would you say, especially in today's economy and
Yeah.
world of small business? What's the biggest mistake small business owners are making these days?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think one of them is it's really easy to get distracted these days,
Yeah.
and there's so many shiny objects out there that you could do to grow your business, right? Or to sell your product. Uh, Maybe you're going to do TikTok, or maybe you're going to do Reels, or maybe you're going to do Threads, all the social media things we were talking about.
Yeah.
But maybe that's not what you need to do. What's your bread and butter? Where are your customers? What do you do? What do you do better than anybody else? And how can you get that message out?
Yeah.
That's kind of the answer. So, and to concentrate on a couple of them rather than too many of them, because I just think it takes time. The learning curve is real. And the two things, right?
For sure.
Especially for older people like us, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
really real, right?
100%.
And it's also like you can do this and you can do that, and I don't know. I think you got to be careful of trying too many things. It's you get distracted, and the time it takes you to learn these new things is a sunk opportunity cost for when you could be doing something else that you do better.
And that's an interesting point, and I like it because what I think for me, and I can speak, and I think it aligns with other people, is how do you get out of the idea stage? Like, call it imposter syndrome, call it whatever
Right.
you want to call it, but I was like, what is my zone of genius? What do I do well? I look back at my career and I go, well, I'm really good at pivoting. I'm really good at, going from this job to this kind of job to that kind of career to
Well,
this
I
kind
think that's a skill I don't have. I would love to be able
of.
to pivot better. So
Yeah.
maybe you can teach me a little bit more even about pivoting, right?
Well, how do you pull that idea out of people? If someone says, that I don't know what, I bring to the table, kind of a thing. How do you pull that depth out of people and go, you always have something to bring to the table,
Okay, I don't want to get too woo woo. I'm not going to get woo woo
Okay.
here.
Oh,
But I'll get a
woo-woo it
little
out.
woo woo. Okay. And so the law of attraction. What's the law of attraction? Well, it's just like doing what you're gifted at, right?
Yeah.
What I like about that idea is like what's
Yeah.
easy for you, right?
Yeah.
And like I tried a new project last year, and it was like pulling teeth the whole time. I wanted to do this coaching program, and it had a marketing component, and both of those things just felt really difficult for me. But on the left side of my brain, it kept thinking this is a good idea, and you got to do it. And so I dropped way too much money and way too much time on something that never flowed. And I should have known at this point in my life, I should know that if it's not flowing, if it's not easy and organic on some level, I'm probably barking up the wrong tree. I think that's true for any of your listeners and watchers. You know when it's easy, you know when it's your zone of genius, you're doing something that you're viscerally good at. And this thing I was trying to do just never clicked. And as a result, it didn't click because somehow people knew it just didn't find its niche ever.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You gotta, I still say, part of my job is as an entrepreneur, my job is to throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
Right. And so I threw something against the wall. It didn't stick. It was a good lesson. But it is a reminder that finding those things that come to you easier usually work better than those things that are not. Not that hard things are bad. We all like hard things.
Yeah.
They need to be that way sometimes. They're going to be challenging to work for us sometimes.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't always be challenging, I don't think.
I agree with that. Keep that in mind. If you're just constantly hitting walls, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to know this is not the right path forward. Pivot just a little. Take
Yeah.
a different direction.
So
Okay,
so you tell me. I want to ask you a question. Can I ask you?
Sure.
Can I interview? I had
Oh,
my own podcast for a decade, so I'm sorry.
no, this is great. I love it.
All right. So what's the secret to making a good pivot? Like I told you, I'm in the middle of a pivot. The pivot I'm in the middle of is I used to have this content world all kind of to myself.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, there were a lot of people who made content, but they didn't have the platform to really create content.
Yeah.
COVID showed up, everyone went home, everyone went online and started making content. And then AI showed up and AI started making content. And all of a sudden, I have a ton more competition than I ever had before. And I'm a little older. So I was like, do I really want to pivot? But I'm not done working. I love my work. I love working with entrepreneurs. I love thinking about them. But I got to think, I'm figuring out some new things, like a newsletter, a couple other things. But what's the secret to making a successful pivot? Tell us, please. Tell me,
That is
please.
such a great question. You're catching me off guard here, but
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to throw you on.
No, I
All
love
right.
it. Thank you for asking it. Quite honestly, I think it's an individual thing. There's no right or wrong answer. There's no one direct answer to this. Like, here's what you have to do, right? But I can tell you what's worked for me. And
Yeah.
with people asking me that over the years, I finally did have to, a while back, I took a step back and I said, what is it that I do? How do I do it? I used to say, I was just always confident and I was fearless, never afraid to fall, right? Never afraid to fall on my face and have to start over. In fact, that was like part of the excitement about it.
Yeah.
But that's not everybody, right? So I had to come up with kind of a step-by-step process. And one of the things I put together, what I like to call the drawer method, right? And it really is the very first thing you have to do. And I use this in everyday life, right? Is you first have to decide to, if you know this thing over here that you want to do, you just have to decide to do it. And you
Mm-hmm.
gotta put it in motion. It doesn't have to be the biggest leap of faith. It doesn't have to be a $50,000 investment. It doesn't have to be that. You just have to make the decision, I'm going to do it. And once you do that, so that's D, right? And then you have to sort of reflect, right? And just sort of take a step back and decide, what is it that's stopping me from doing it? Remove it. So remove whatever's in the way, whether it's a naysayer in your life, maybe it's your own imposter syndrome,
The
maybe
naysayer in your head, right?
right, whatever's stopping you, you have to remove that first, right?
Yeah.
Then you just have to apply what you know. To your point, Steve, your zone of genius. You have to figure out what is it that you're bringing to the table that you want to apply to whatever it is you want to do, right? So it's a very generic kind of step. So that's A. And then once you figure those first three things out, you make the decision, you remove the negative, and you apply it. Wing it. Just do it. Take the leap of faith. Get out
Great advice.
and do it, right? Maybe you have to learn a few things. Maybe you have to do, but just apply it and wing it, and then take a step back. You've done it. Okay, what worked? What didn't work? How can I improve it? Did I love it? Did I not love it? Make all those things, right?
You know what? That's great because so many of us get stuck in analysis paralysis. Right, you're at that moment where I'll just watch another video, I'll just take another course, something like that. So, and your advice is the opposite. Don't do that.
Don't do that. I've done it and I get it. I mean, from last February, so we're past a year now, but last February 2025, I semi-retired. I decided, you know what? No more. I'm not looking for I'm done. Well, I'll be an Amazon affiliate. Okay, maybe I'll write a book. Okay, maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll do that. Have a YouTube channel. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to. And I had all these things, and it was driving me crazy.
Yeah,
I was so overwhelmed. I was overwhelming myself. So just to finish that, you wing it, and then you have to evaluate what you've done, and then literally rinse and repeat it, and keep doing it. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. And that's
okay.
that's my answer. Like, that's kind of been my method that I didn't even know I had. But when somebody asked me this question multiple times, many people over the years, I finally had to take a step back and go, what do I put in place that makes me do these things or helps me to make that pivot and do those things? And that's what it really is. So like, I went from driving a school bus to being an international flight attendant.
Huh.
I want to be on the plane. I like to travel. Okay, great. So just driving around a school bus isn't going to work for you anymore? No, not really. Okay, so what am I going to do? I'm going to go to the local airport, and I'm going to be at Lancaster Airport in Pennsylvania. I'm going to be a customer service agent on the ground. I mean, there were 3 flights out of there every day. So I learned it all. And as that happened,
Nice.
then it evolved into You could be a flight attendant. Okay, 6 weeks in Moon Township, Pennsylvania, I learned to be a flight attendant for US Airways. And then I was like, well, gosh, domestic, whew, that's rough. Let's go international. You get more time off in between. So that's what I did. I went international. It just is like, and every time it was like, I decided to do it, move on. That was
Very
a
good.
long
Okay.
answer to your question.
I know that's a great answer to my question.
So that's kind of all right. So we talked about the idea behind the show obviously is people's moments in life when they realize something needs to change. So we talked a little bit before we hopped on that you're in the messy middle right now. So
yeah.
Tell me more.
So I've reinvented myself several times. I think like many people, what I never anticipated was I would need to do a little more. If I'm not done working yet, I'm not quite done working yet. Business changes. One of the challenging parts of entrepreneurship in business, especially these days, is how quickly it changes, right? Now we're in this middle of this AI thing, right? But I remember even when people were going online for the first time and figuring out digital marketing or their website or email and things like that, or social media, right? These are all actually fundamental, monumental changes, and AI is no less and maybe even more than many of those.
Yeah.
And so I'm figuring out, okay, so I got to learn some new skills, right? And I like, okay, can you really teach an old dog new tricks? Well, apparently you can, because I've learned a couple, and you've learned a couple, and the people watching have learned a couple. We all have, right? But it's a little uncomfortable. I didn't expect that at this stage of my career. I could just keep, even book writing is different, right? The publishing world is very different with online books and self-publishing and things like that. So just adapting to a changing business landscape is part of the deal you make when you decide to become an entrepreneur. So you get the freedom and you get to keep the money. They write the checks out to you. You get to make the decisions, and we look all those things, and you have to stay current, whatever current means, because it's going to change.
Well, listen, if this episode, listeners, resonated with you, subscribe and share it with somebody who might benefit from this conversation. That's how we pay it forward. And if you're navigating a season of change in your own life, you can learn more at thesockdrawerpodcast.com. I'm Lisa Begley. Thanks for listening and being part of our family today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye. Every week we come here and open the drawer. You already know what's inside. You always have. And if this conversation challenged you in a good way, and you think it will help challenge someone else who needs it, send it to them, because that's how we pay it forward together. Subscribe and follow so you never miss what's coming next. And find us at thesockdrawerpodcast.com.